Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Talk North Hockey Show. Anthony LaPanta is being given the week off by me because I have one of my buddies and fellow colleagues coming up here. The Talk North Hockey Show is brought to you by Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatments. Profiled by Sanford, Twill in the Edina Galleria, State Farm agent Tony Hoagland, and Bosch Law, and you'll hear more about them later. But really happy to be joined by one of the most respected insiders in the NHL. You could follow him on Twitter. You could listen to his 31 Thoughts podcast with co-host Jeff Merrick, which is absolutely awesome, and read his just amazing 31 Thoughts every week at the Sportsnet website. Elliotte Friedman, how are you?
I'm good, Michael. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. The 31 Thoughts, to me, one, I don't know when you have time to write it, but I don't know when you have time to report on it. Because, I was just telling one of our young colleagues at The Athletic the other day, he called me in a panic because he started talking about somebody that might be traded from his team. And I'm like, well, you better, one, believe it. But two, you read those 31 Thoughts, and they are legitimately new thoughts every week, stuff that hasn't been reported elsewhere. And that's what to me is amazing in this day and age of all of us essentially swiping from each other, is that pretty much everything that you put it starts with you.
Well, I think it's important, right? I do think that there's a lot of good reporting on hockey right now. It depends on what your interest is. If your interest is on reporting what teams are going to be doing, I think there's a lot of good reporting out there. I think if your interest is in analytics, I think there's a lot of good reporting out there. I know that the amount of jobs in media and the pressures financially on media are greater than ever, Michael. But I think, despite that, I think there's a lot of people, whether their work is online, whether they do it themselves as a hobby, whether they do it to create a Patreon, whether they work for some kind of media entity, I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. I'm constantly looking at things and saying, oh, damn, I wish I'd done that, or I wish that was my story. And I think what you just try to do is challenge yourself to try to come up with new stuff. I just believe that that's the only way you can really keep your head above water, is what can you find that's new? And, it's funny, sometimes someone will report something and we have a group chat from our digital leaders at work, and they'll be like, or our news desk at work, and they'll be like, can you confirm this, or is this true? And sometimes I'm not really eager to do that. Actually, never mind that. A lot of the time I'm not really eager to do that because my mentality is, okay, I got beaten on that one, what's the next one? I don't want to be clean up on aisle 6. I want to create a mess in aisle 7. So that's just kind of my mentality. I think that there's a lot of good stuff out there, Michael, and you're constantly chasing what out there is new, and that's just kind of the way I look at things.
How exhausting does it become? Because I could tell you with me, I mean, I'm singularly focused on one team. Yep. And it's stressful. I mean, there are times where, you can't put your phone down, you can't take a nap, you can't, you always got to check to make sure, all right, can I actually go to this wedding? Can I go to dinner? And that's just with one team. It's got to be, and at times it really does become exhausting. How it's got to be times that by 30 for you.
Well, the way I look at it is this: I knew the rules coming in, And there are times like my wife will say to me, like, "You're not even listening to me," and I really do feel badly about that. It's interesting. You're getting the timing that we're doing this. I watched The Social Dilemma last night. Have you seen
Me
it? Have you
too. I
seen this
watched it.
yet?
Yes, yes.
So, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think I kind of understand a lot about the way the world works. And someone's opening up their morning pop, I hear.
Yeah, it's my LaCroix water.
Okay,
Sorry.
I hope they're a sponsor, so that's good. I watched, and I kind of had an understanding about the way this stuff works and the algorithms and the AI, and to some degree, but I even found it eye opening. Like
Yes.
there was stuff in there that I didn't realize. For example, Michael, the one scene where the mother challenges her son, if you go a week without the phone, I'll get you a new one because his screen got cracked. And they talk about how they notice, okay, his phone action is down, he's not spending time on the apps, how can we pull him back out there? And I think you and I are very similar. Like I watch your work, you're unbelievable at your job. And I think you're a lot like me. It's like, okay, what am I missing? What piece of information am I not on top of? And I think about that all the time. I'm expected to do a job. I'm hired to do a job, and I believe I have a responsibility to do the job. And you're constantly wondering, what am I missing out there? And I think right now the blog in the playoffs, the blog doesn't come out as much. You're on the air every day. You want to do the best possible job when you're on the air every day. And now in the Stanley Cup final, when we're for the most part every other day, there's a bit more time, but you can't keep on top of the news if you're properly preparing for a broadcast. And I do admit I have some moments about that where I'm like, I got to be more on top of things. I don't like that I feel I'm not as on top of things. But one of the things I really think about a lot is, my son is about to turn 9. I think about it a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I watch how much he's on the iPad, and I worry that he picks it up from me. Oh, well, Daddy's doing it, so I can do that too. And Michael, I think about this stuff a lot, but at the end of the day, I'm paid to do a job. My company leans on me to do a job. I have a lot of pride in how I do that job, and my family. We take care of my family through that job. So
Yeah.
I'm a determined guy to begin with, and I just think that sometimes in this job, I think I remember there was someone when I was about 30, and she was a big sports fan, and she wanted to become a sports reporter. And she said to me, though, like, I value my social life, and I would love a 9 to 5 sports job. And I said to her, like, I don't think you're wrong at all to have your values the way you are. If that's what you value, I encourage that. But you can't be a sports reporter.
Yep.
At least not a good one. And I said, like, you when you come into this business, it is all encompassing. If you want to be great at it, it is really all encompassing. And like, I tell people that, like I say to myself, I knew the rules going in. I knew it was going to be like this. And I always say to people, if you really want to do this and you really want to be good at it, these are the rules coming in. You better be prepared for them.
Yep, no doubt about it, Elliotte. And a great example actually is 2 Fridays ago, I flew down to Atlanta to surprise my mother for her birthday, and I was having dinner at my brother's house and my sister-in-law's house. My mother was there, and about an hour before the Bukestad trade, I got a call that the Wild were getting Bukestad. And it was one of those things where that I deal with a lot. Like, you can't report it now, but here's a heads up to start working on your story. I get that all the time. And I went back to my hotel, and my mother looked at me like, are you kidding me? And I looked at her and I'm like, Mom, like, I've done this job for 25 hockey seasons. You know how it works. I got to run. I'll see you later. And that's just the way it works. It's the kind of lifestyle that we lead. It's very beneficial. It's very rewarding, but man, it can be tough at times.
Oh, well, like I said, I don't like to complain about it because I knew the rules going in. But I think about it a lot, about my family, especially now. Like, I think for a lot of people, as we've gone through COVID, and people have challenges, health challenges, financial challenges. There's no question, the world economy is taking a beating, and it all flows downhill. I think a lot of us are reevaluating, how do we interact with our families? How do we interact with the relationships that really matter? But I think the other thing too is that, is that in some ways it also motivates you to work harder, because at some point changes are going to be coming, and are you going to be affected? So
Yep.
I think, I can only control what I can control, and what I control is the effort. But I don't want anyone to think that I don't like it. I love the job. I love the challenge of it. Michael, I think you and I are similar in that we probably wanted this career. We had some idea of the challenges of it. Like anything you do in life, there are greater challenges than you expect, but you also get to witness and see incredible things. Like,
Yep.
I've been able to see things I never imagined I'd be able to see. And I also think that being around elite level athletes, elite level coaches, elite level executives has made me better as a person, because I see what it really takes to succeed at a high level. And you're sitting there when you were in Florida, you dealt with Pavel Bure, who was one of the greatest ever, and
Yep.
you probably saw how he approached his job. And you're in Minnesota, and you're dealing with the likes of players there like Devin Dubnyk, a guy who resuscitated his career from the bottom and turned himself into a franchise goaltender for you guys. And you see how you approach his job. Like, I find all this stuff kind of really interesting and inspiring. And I know it's made me better, because I realize how driven you have to be successful at anything.
No doubt. It's funny that you brought up Bure, because yesterday I had a interview for a freelance piece I'm writing on Nick Bukestad, and Bukestad, as you know, obviously it was drafted in the first round in Florida. He grew up there. He's seen the pictures of Bure everywhere, the highlights, and I was telling him all these Pavel Bure stories about how he approached the game and all that type of stuff, and he was just kind of on the edge of his seat listening to it. So it's pretty funny. We're going to take a pause right now. One of our favorite sponsors here on the Talk North Hockey Show is Twill in the Edina Galleria. They've been here since day one.
Twill in the Edina Galleria. The great thing is you can go check out their great fall collection in person. You can do it by phone or video consultation. You can do personal shopping with curbside pickup, contactless home delivery. And you can do any of these just by contacting the owner himself, friend of our program and of us personally, Scott Dayton at scott@twillmn.com, TWILLMN.com. TwillMN.com is the website. Check out the Instagram feed, which is, again, beautiful, Twill Edina, at Twill Edina. And, support a great local business and a good-hearted owner in Scott Dayton.
We're talking with Elliotte Friedman from Sportsnet. You can see him all the time on Hockey Night in Canada. Obviously, read his 31 Thoughts articles that are on mostly weekly on Sportsnet, and his 31 Thoughts podcast that you can listen to anywhere with Jeff Merrick. One of the things that you had before the pause, before the return to play, Elliotte, at the very bottom of one of your 31 Thoughts was a little almost mission statement about social media, and how one of the unhealthiest things about the job that we do is just some of the pushback we get, some of the nastiness that we get. And I took a lot of advice from you. I mean, the one thing that I did is really upgraded my quality filters on my podcast, on my Twitter account. If you don't follow me, I never see what you reply to me. That was one thing I did. But for somebody like me, it's hard to cut it totally off, because I need the questions for podcasts. Fans give me a lot of good ideas. They see things during games that sometimes I miss. So I need it. But the one thing that you just talked about was social dilemma, and then the social media is I got to imagine when you're followed by 550,000 people, it's a lot different than what I'm dealing with.
Well, Maybe yes and maybe no. Like I keep my DMs open too because I've gotten some good tips in there.
Yep.
But also I've gotten some real moronic stuff. I have a pretty thick skin in general. I'm 50 years old now. I used to be one of those people. And whenever I speak to students or young people, I talk to them a lot about this, especially now. Like I used to be one of those people, Michael, who wanted to be liked. I wanted everyone to like me. And then I realized, and pretty early in my career too, it's if you're doing your job, it's not going to happen, right? Like there's going to be plenty of people. Like Michael, you know how this business is. What's sometimes that you're not a guy who brings like a hammer a lot. You and I approach the job really similarly. And this is why I think your Paul Fenton story was as effective as it was. It's because you're not a guy who takes gratuitous shots at people. You save it for when you really think it's deserved. And actually, it was Damian Cox early in my career. We were covering a Maple Leafs exhibition game one night, and they were losing 4-0 to the Canadiens early, and the crowd was booing, and this was during exhibition season, and the whole press box was ripping them, and the next day the only guy who didn't rip them in print or on radio or TV was Damien. And I asked him about that, and he said, save your bullets. He says it'll be more meaningful when you do that. And so you know that in our jobs, it's when we get information that people don't like that people really get mad at us. So you have to deal with that, and that's just going to happen if you're doing your job. The online world to me I just think now it's like you said. I'm very fortunate that I have enough people interested in me that I have that many followers. And just imagine if 1% of those people are mad at you. That's 5,000 people. And imagine them all yelling at you at the same time. And it can be a lot. And I've got a very thick skin. It takes a lot to get to me. I used to get comments about my weight all the time. I used to get racial slurs directed at me all the time. And, finally I read about the quality filter, and I said, look, I'm taking that stuff out. Like, it doesn't really bother me, but I don't need to see it. And, I just tell people, you can only worry about the people who really care about you. Like I think in your universe, Michael, that you have the people who really care about you, and you've got the people you cover. You have to deal with them, and then I would bet the vast majority of the people who follow you are following you because they're really interested in what you have to say about hockey or the Wild, and they're genuinely curious. And then there's the 1 to 5% that ruin it for everybody else. And I'm just a big believer in you can't let those people win. You have to shake it off. I think all of us have our switch that gets flipped. There will be something that nobody cannot get their skin. Nobody is invulnerable. We're all going to get stuff that gets under our skin. I just take great pains to limit it and do a serenity now so it doesn't go overly crazy. It takes an awful lot. I think you've got to be either for me to snap on you, you've really got to be like a horrible person or do something that I think is horrible. And I think when you do it like that and then you actually do it, it's actually meaningful. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Elliotte just talked about people making fun of his weight. I wish I had the weight problem that Elliotte Friedman has. I've always had a weight problem, and that hopefully is getting under wraps here. I joined Profile by Sanford, and the results have been absolutely awesome. 50 pounds down since May 1st, actually closing in on 55. I still have work to do. It just shows you how many bad habits I got into last hockey season and during the beginning of the quarantine. And if anybody knows me, you know that my weight fluctuates, especially during hockey season. And once I continued those bad habits, I really joined Profile by Stanford. I started right away, and it's just been absolutely awesome. The program's developed by doctors at Sanford hospitals to take the guesswork out of weight loss. Honestly, every single day I wake up and I'm actually looking forward to the day. I think about what I'm going to eat, and I eat healthy. And one big reason is also I get the personal coaching. I get that tomorrow with my personal coach, Danette. I do that on a weekly basis. I go over my challenges for the week. I got a wedding on Saturday. I'll talk about that. And then she gives me some tips, and away I go. I follow their activities app. Their food is absolutely scrumptious, and I feel constant support. So what are you waiting for? There's 6 locations in the Twin Cities. There's also locations nationwide and throughout the state of Minnesota on the outskirts. So for more information, go to profileplan.com and tell them Russo sent you. Profileplan.com. Man, I'm big with the mute and the block, and part of it is to protect myself because I don't know if I have as thick a skin as you, and it does bother me, and I'll be thinking about it an hour later, and I'll inevitably go back and look for the tweet, and sometimes it's better to just kind of get rid of them right off the hop, and I just don't understand from a humanity standpoint why people just can't be nicer.
Well, it's just the whole world now. Like you look, especially now that a lot of people are just sitting around not doing as much. Like how many people are working? Like everybody's life has changed. How many people are working normally? So you've got even more time to be mad online. Plus, there's things out there in the world right now that are much more legitimate to be upset about than, Canucks 6 Wild 2, so people are legitimately angry. Like but what I always tell people is I have think of something that always makes you laugh. Okay, so we have this joke now at hockey night where Berkey will be on for a segment, and when the segment's over, I'll walk by. He'll say, "Good job, Juice. Good job, Dave. Good job, Ron," and he won't say "good job" to me. And it never doesn't make me laugh. Like he can do it every night. He's basically done it every night for 60 straight nights, and I always laugh. I think it's really funny.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm beginning to think that my temperature is rising, I think of something like that, and immediately it breaks it. Like maybe there's something from a TV show you like, Mike, or something like that.
Yep.
But just have it on your phone, like a link to it on YouTube or whatever, so that when you feel your temperature boiling, you click on that and you laugh, and you'd be surprised it's broken.
I'll start using that. Actually, I'll use a Berkey one. Berkey told me this hilarious story that I think is in his book about Doug Risebrough and how he almost knocked Doug Risebrough out one day in his office back in, I think, 07 or 08. So just think about that one.
Let me ask you something. If there was a fight between Doug Risebrough and Brian Burke, who are you taking?
You know what? Doug was one tough puppy as a player, but I would take Berkey in a heartbeat.
Really?
I think I would. Berkey scares me. You'd have the tie. It's something with the tie, I think.
He probably fights dirty or something like that.
Yeah, no doubt. But
Doug Risebrough, man, he was a tough guy.
Holy cow. Was. No doubt. And Doug, it happened inevitably. Like with me, you're always, if you're a GM, you're eventually going to get angry with me. And he was once scared the heck out of me. We're in this place called Parade Ice Garden here in Minnesota in the lobby, and he lost his mind on me. And I was like, wow, I've never seen that from him. So that taught me a little bit of a lesson.
So what's the biggest one? What's the biggest one you've ever had? Like, what's the biggest
blow up with I had a phone call once, couple phone calls with Chuck Fletcher that were a little scary. I know that might surprise people. Paul Fenton and I had
could see that.
3 or 4 ones. In fact, the game 82 at the entire morning skate for a half hour, it happened in front of the entire team, was a little awkward. And then I covered Mike Keenan in Florida, but I kind of got a kick out of Keenan. So Brian Murray and I had a couple blow-ups. I mean,
but Murray kind of liked it. He wanted to challenge you. He wanted to challenge you.
100%.
That's what I loved about him. It was all about a challenge. Like he wanted to see what you would do.
And Murray was the type of person, the second he got it out, he was fine. It was like he just had to let you know he was pissed. You had it out. And I once covered him in 1997-98, and the Panthers, that was the year they had a 15-game winless streak and a 13-game losing streak in the second half of the season. Oh. And he fired, Doug McClain got fired, and the Panthers were terrible, and he took over as coach, and I gave him, during the All-Star break, I gave him an F. We were in Vancouver. I remember doing it. I gave him an F for coaching and an F for GMing. And so we were on this 8-game road trip, first 5 before the All-Star game, the last 3 in California after the All-Star game. By the way, the Panthers didn't win a game. And anyway, from one end of the hallway in Anaheim to the other end of the hallway in Anaheim, he and I are walking toward each other, and he absolutely laid into me the entire walk as we were walking toward each other. So that was probably the most memorable one. But
You know what I think that's good though.
What's that?
I just want to say, like, it doesn't come out, but you keep it private. You don't make a big deal out of it. I respect that, Michael.
I try
to be the same way. I don't always succeed, but I try to be the same way.
Yep, no doubt. And let's take another pause. You can hear from my personal car insurance and homeowners insurance agent, State Farm agent Tony Hoagland.
You choose your home and car for a reason. They were the right fit for you. So why not make sure your insurance is the right fit too? Here's the deal. At State Farm, you can combine home and auto and save an average of $889. That's right. To combine and save, call State Farm agent Tony Hoagland. He's at 763-421-4900. Or check out the website at champlaininsurance.com.
We're talking with Elliotte Friedman from Sportsnet. I have a ton of Twitter questions for you, but let's talk a little hockey. The one thing that was interesting, we were both on the Gary Bettman and Bill Daly Zoom the other day for the State of the League address, and as much as they didn't want to talk about it, pretty much every single question was regarding next season, which has got to be just absolutely tedious to try to schedule. You're talking about two countries, one that's handling COVID well, the other that's not handling COVID well. So Canada wants nothing to do with the United States, which makes scheduling next season extremely tough. Owners are losing a ton of money. They got no revenue coming in. It certainly feels like we're heading for a shortened season next year, starting in January at the earliest.
That's what I think. Like if you listen to Adam Silver the other day, he was on with Bob Costas on CNN. And he said most likely January. And, I don't think that these leagues are not paying attention to what each other's doing. The NBA and the NHL are very similar schedules, similar closed arenas, close contact. Like one's going to do what the other's going to do just because it makes sense. And so that says to me the NHL is probably thinking around January 2. I think if you look at it also, TV ratings, the NFL is basically anything proof. It's the only thing that survives. It doesn't get hammered in the TV ratings at all. And, I'm looking the other night, the NHL was down big for game one of the Stanley Cup final. The Emmys were down big. The NBA was down. The U.S. Open golf was down. And the NFL Monday Nighter was up. It had so like I could just see them saying, we want to compete with as little as football as possible. So, and plus also, I really do believe in both leagues that owners want a path to attendance. And, the commissioner went out of his way unprompted to say, maybe we start with no fans and then we start, adding fans. And I do think like the phrase I've been told since the beginning, Michael, is a path to attendance. And I think that that's what teams want. I think there's two other questions, though. When you talked about the border, I do think a Canadian division is possible next year, or for 1 year only, the Canadian teams only play each other. I think there's a chance of that. And the other thing, I'm thinking about is, just the possibility of, Minnesota goes to play Chicago, and you go play back-to-back. Then, Chicago comes to play Minnesota. Chicago plays you back to back. Like I do think it could be more of a baseball type schedule next year. I do think that this is something they're going to consider.
Do you feel like, it certainly also feels like if NBC has the Olympic trials and the Olympics pretty much starting around July 1, that they've got to award a cup by June 30th.
Well, if you heard the commissioner also in that media availability, he says he's not crazy about summer hockey, right?
Right.
And also, I think in the next year, you're looking at some point in time, you want to get your schedule back to the normal. So at some point, you're going to have to want to try to start playing at the beginning of October. So that way, you want to give your players their summers off. Like this year, what did players say this year? They don't like not having their summers off. And I get it. They're creatures of habit. So let's get back to – and also, don't forget, the NHL players are supposed to go to the Olympics in February 2022. Assuming, A, people want to go to China, and B, there's an Olympics. So you're facing another disruption. So how do you handle that? I agree with you. The commissioner's saying 82 games right now. To me, that's probably revenue related. If you don't commit to 82 games, at least now, people are going to start saying, okay, how are we going to adjust all our deals? Okay, we want our ticket money back. So
Yep.
I think part of it is that. But to me, it's hard to see how it's going to be the 82 game season.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how the AHL and the ECHL does it too, because obviously if the NHL's pushed back to January, the AHL will start after that. And the ECHL right now, you do have to wonder if some teams are going to have to take the year off. I just saw a funny question from Brett Marshall. Says, how does being an insider differ from being a beat writer? Here's a great example that just popped in my head.
Okay.
So NHL awards, but the year of the expansion. Elliotte puts out his 31 thoughts. I'm having dinner with Tracy Myers at the Delmonico.
I felt bad about this one.
Have I told you the story before?
No, but I know where you're going. Yeah.
So I'm having dinner with Tracy Myers at Delmonico Steakhouse. And the one thing, and Elliotte, I swear to God, every time you put out the 31 thoughts, the first thing I do is open it up. And the one thing I do, and again, the difference between an insider and a beat writer is I skim it first to make sure there's no wild news in there, because that's the thing. The genius of Elliotte is that Elliotte breaks stories for 31 teams. So I'm sitting with Tracy, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm skimming Elliott's 31 thoughts, looking for wild news." And she goes, "Oh, anything on the Blackhawks?" I'm like, "You know what? There's something about Hossa at the top, but I didn't read it." And then she opens it up, and her mouth just ajar. Elliotte broke the story that I skimmed right over, that Marian Hossa was retiring from the National Hockey League.
I'll tell you too, Mark Lazarus, who works at The Athletic, he saw me the next day. He was there, and he said to me, Elliotte, like, it wasn't like we would be like Hossa retiring in like 96 point type. You barely even
there was no headline.
Yeah, and I go, and he wasn't a criticism. He was kind of like just surprised, and I just said, I like to be understated, and and it was just a funny exchange. I just remember that.
It's funny because I said the same thing. I'm like, if I broke the story that Marian Hossa was retiring from the National Hockey League, at a minimum it would be a headline, but it would be so obvious on my tweet that Marian Hossa was retiring, but you were just like, here's the latest 31 thoughts.
So it's funny, but I just think now, it's so easy to get radioed. It's so easy for things to be taken out of context. I know it's the frustration of our editors on the digital side that I don't like to put bold headlines on things. But I just believe that your work should speak, right? And but I felt bad because I heard about that. Like, that story got back to me, Mike. So I felt bad that I ruined Tracy's dinner. But like you said, that's the business. We're used to getting our dinners ruined.
Oh my God! And that was when she was working for I don't think she was still at CSN. So she had to leave the restaurant to do like a TV hit. And she was on with her producer, and she's like, "All I'm going to be doing is saying the stuff that Elliotte reported here. I got no independent reporting." So
that one was a grind too. Like, that one was hard because
late at night, and those are the.
But also the Blackhawks and Hossa were really trying to keep that tight.
Yep.
So it was a tough one to get.
The last month, I've told you a lot about AquariusHomeservices.com, whether your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems. I got a Connecticut revolutionary non-electric water treatment system. They put also a water softener in my utility closet, and then under my sink, they've got just the whole kit and caboodle. It's absolutely awesome. It takes the hardness, iron, rust, bad odor, taste, and contaminants out of my city water. You could do this for your well water as well. You could do this at your house, your cabin, anything. They solve your water problem guaranteed. I cannot even convey how awesome my coffee and my water taste now at my home. So go to AquariusHomeservices.com or call 1-888-741-9025. Again, that's AquariusHomeservices.com or 1-888-741-9025. Again, Aquarius Home Services. They're your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems. Somebody actually asked, what's the longest that you've, Ben Gorman asked, what's the longest you've ever had to sit on a story before being able to reveal it publicly? Because that happens to me all the time. I'm sitting on a couple stories right now that honestly is having trouble making me sleep because I'm worried that the Elliotte Friedmans of the world are going to scoop me. So
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the longest, Ben. That one, I got to tell you, that Hossa one. Now that you're like, I tend not to think back. I tend to look forward, so I'm not really good at answering these kinds of questions. But
yep.
Ben, that Hossa one was about 6 days.
Wow.
And it was just because I couldn't confirm it.
Yeah.
And finally, what I did was I sent an email to someone who was involved, and I said, I'll tell you, one of the particulars in the story, I actually got them on the phone, and they pulled the old, when I told them, look, I'm hearing Marion Hossa's retiring. What's going on? And he pulled the old, I got another call. I'll get to you right back. And he didn't get back to me. Like, we laugh about it now. Like, that's that. And, but what I had to do with Michael was I said, look, and I don't do this very often, but I said, here's the story that I'm about to publish. Mm-hmm. It is going out in 30 minutes. I've given you plenty of chance to talk about it. It's going. So you and then they called me and they said, look, if you're going to do this, there's a couple of things you have to know. And that was how I knew I had it right, but that's how I felt even better. So Ben, that one was about 6 days. It was brutal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, like yesterday, Emily Kaplan did a great ESPN piece on life in the bubble. Mm-hmm. I've been working on something like that, but because, I'm day on, day off at work, I haven't been able to finish it. And I was like, oh, damn. Like, that's what that was like.
A couple more minutes with Elliotte or probably kept him from a couple scoops here.
No, it's all good. It's quiet right now anyway.
Yeah. But it's interesting what you said. I mean, I pulled the same thing, and actually that Chuck Fletcher fight that I was telling you about on the phone, one of them was the same type of thing. I finally sent him a text. I'm like, I've given you all day to respond to me about Zach Parise's back and not being, I basically was reporting that he was not going to be on the plane going to Dallas for the playoffs in 2018. Mm-hmm. And I reported exactly what was wrong with him, all this stuff. And that's finally where he finally just, all right, I got to call him back. And so it was a lovely conversation. Talking with Elliotte Friedman. A couple more on hockey. Alex Pietrangelo is the big name right now from a defenseman point of view in free agency. It certainly looks like talks have broken off with the St. Louis Blues. It certainly looks like the Vegas Golden Knights and the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to come after him hard. Does it shock you that this fell apart, that the captain of the Blues looks like he's out of there?
It shocks me because you think that this would get done, right? Mm-hmm. But, the more I've researched into it, I've just realized that this has been trending in this direction the whole way. And the other thing, too, is now that it's public, sometimes we talked about the way people react to things publicly. There's a lot of people here that are really tough negotiators. Like Doug Armstrong, the GM of the Blues, I don't think it's going to bother him that this is out there. This might make him more entrenched on his side. Mm-hmm. And the people at Newport who represent Alex Pietrangelo, they're not afraid of the public arena either. And I do think we're going to see both sides take maybe one more shot at this closer to October the 9th. But people said to me, the fact that it's out there in public, it's not going to scare a lot of these guys in the short term. And because they're used to being in public, they're very tough negotiators, and they're just my side is my side, and this is what we can do. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about the signing bonus structure and stuff like that, and the Blues are refusing to do it, but I've heard they're not even close on AAV either. Like, it is not close. So I think right now, sometimes I think it's purely a negotiating tactic. I think this was more than that. I think this was just a sign that it's totally off the rails, and it's going to be a challenge to get it back on.
Yep, no doubt. Here's a word from our newest sponsor, Bosch Law Firm.
Hey everyone, Attorney Jerry Bosch here with Bosch Law Firm and WorkCompExperts.com. For almost 30 years, we've represented Minnesotans just like you all over the great state of Minnesota to guarantee they've been treated fairly and with respect when they've suffered a work-related injury. A work injury can change your life in an instant. You need someone on your side who can help you focus on getting back on your feet and getting paid while you do. You may be entitled to medical benefits, wage loss benefits, job placement, retraining, and payment for permanent disability. To make sure you are being paid all the work comp benefits you're entitled to, please call the attorneys at Bosch Law Firm. The call is always free, and there's never a fee unless we recover benefits on your behalf. Call 651-333-8300, Bosch Law Firm, or visit us at workcompexperts.com.
Let me ask you this on Petro, Elliotte. If he leaves St. Louis, if, say, Vegas loses out to Petro to Toronto even, would that open up 2 more teams for Dumba? We've gone 35 minutes here without talking about Matt Dumba.
I think, you're closer to this situation than I am, Michael, so you tell me if I'm wrong. I think what Bill Guerin has said is, if you want Matt Dumba, you have to hit my target.
Yes.
And now, the difference between last year and this year is that eventually there's a clock here. And the clock is the expansion draft. And, you've written about the horrors of Minnesota's last expansion draft. And I do think they're like Seattle, like the whole COVID situation is really going to, I say this not seriously, but is going to help Seattle's situation because teams are going to be stuck now. Before they were all talking like, I'm not making deals. If I have to lose a player, I'll lose a player, but I'm not making the same mistakes I made last time. Now people are going to be stuck again. I just think that at some point in time, Guerin's going to have to do something because I don't think he wants to be put in the situation where he's got to protect 4D. But to this point, I believe he said, if you want Matt Dumba, it's going to cost you this, which is probably a number 1 center or number 2 center. And to that point, he's not backing down. Now, Bill Guerin, he's got brass ones.
Yep.
And he is going to play this game, and he's not going to be afraid, and he's not going to lack confidence in it.
I completely agree with you, and to me, that's the way he should be. Is there's no rush to trade him. First of all, you're on Matt. You're kind of trading at the worst possible time. He's coming off a tough year, and he's coming off a situation where in a pandemic, every team right now, it's not easy for 30 teams to take on $6 million player. But this team, if you're going to trade Matt Dumba, he might be your only chip to get a top center. And so unless it's a futures trade where it's just an incredible amount of assets, to me, you've got to stand pat here. And that's why when people were asking a couple of weeks ago, Wild fans that just have this incredible infatuation for Brock Besser, does a Besser for Dumba trade make sense? In a normal situation, it might from a Minnesota standpoint, but not from the actual standpoint that this is your way to maybe get a top center.
I think I would look at it this way with Besser. First of all, I don't think Vancouver wants to do that. That's
right.
Number 1.
100%.
Okay? So then you're out that way. But number 2, I think the thing is, though, you still got to score in this league. I could see Minnesota saying, okay, if we think Besser is enough of a difference maker from a goal-scoring point of view, that could move them off the center position. But I think it's got to be like a legitimate elite sniper to take them off the center position.
Laine, there's no way it could be Laine, right? Because I just don't see where the fits happen with Winnipeg.
Well, I just think the one thing I think about Dumba is that Dumba is what Winnipeg covets. A right-handed shot defenseman with term and team control.
Right.
Like I always look for patterns, Michael. What do teams like? What do certain people like? In Minnesota, you've written about how they want more Minnesota-born players. You know what kind of players Chuck liked. You know what kind of players Fenton liked. You're learning what kind of players that Guerin likes. And you know the owner. You know what he wants. There's a profile there, right? Winnipeg's profile is, can we get guys under team control? And that's Dumba fits. And they're looking for right-hand D. like to me, and I've talked about this a little bit, the question about Laine is it's not about them, it's about him. What does he want here? He's only got one more year under contract, and then he's got 2 years to unrestricted free agency. I think he's not thrilled with his role on the team. Like at some point in time, if Winnipeg's going to have to make an honest decision, can we keep him? Can we not keep him? Now, right now, they have a bit more of the hammer because he's under contract. He's 3 years away from unrestricted free agency. But eventually, that pendulum is going to swing. And what Winnipeg has to decide is, first, they have to be honest. Are we risking losing this player? That's number one. And number two, if we are, when do we have to maximize this so that we don't lose him when we really don't have control? That's the only reason I think Laine is a possibility, though I don't know the likelihood of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, they would love to play with Scheifele, and that just seems to never happen. And Wheeler obviously plays wing there as well. Last couple minutes with Elliotte. Elliotte, just Calgary is another team that we've written a lot about in a potential Dumba deal, just because maybe Sean Monahan's available. Do you think that at all would grease the wheels in terms of the two teams?
I think it makes sense on paper. The one thing I do believe is that Brad Treliving, the Calgary GM, he's one of those guys who's in the middle of everything. Whenever a good player, he's a believer in, if a good player is available, I'm looking at it. And I think Calgary too is another team potentially in transition. They've got some changes on their D coming. They've got 2 UFAs. They're not happy with the way they finished the year. He's in the middle of everything. I think again, it's like we just talked about with Laine, right? Goudreau's got 2 years to unrestricted free agency. At some point in time, you have to figure out A, what are our reasonable chances of keeping him, and then B, when do we have to make the move? And the thing about Monahan is I think he's a really good player, but if he doesn't have a distributor there, it's harder for him to score. He's a guy who goes right to the front of the net and he scores from there. So if you don't have that Goudreau type player there, it's going to be harder for him to score. And and that's the question I think Calgary asks. But like I said, if a good player is available, they're in it. So I assume they are in it for sure.
Yeah. Just a couple more for you. You reported recently that the Montreal Canadiens inquired about Devin Dubnyk before the Jake Allen trade, which might have given Dubnyk a heart attack if he went back to Montreal, because that's the
I remembered later. Yes.
Yeah, that's the place where his career almost came to an end, but that was where he was going to Hamilton. He was in Hamilton, not ever with the Canadiens. But the one thing I get the impression of from the Wild is that they do not plan to buy out Dubnyk, but they again want to improve their goaltending. Do you think that there could be a market for Dubnyk in a league right now where the market is really saturated by potential available goaltenders?
Well, here's the one thing. What does Devin Dubnyk cost you? That Jacob Markstrom is going to cost you term and money. Okay? That Darcy Kemper, another guy with connections to Minnesota, is going to cost you, because he's got a great contract, so it's going to cost you assets.
Right.
Okay? We talked earlier about what the schedule could look like next year. You're going to need 2 goalies. So I think, they traded for Evans. I heard the other guy they were looking at too was Ranta. There were 3 guys they were looking at. It was Evans, Dubnyk, and Ranta. And they made the deal for Evans because they felt it was the best deal. Or Allen, excuse me. What am I talking about?
Evans just signed with Montreal.
Yeah, that's what I got in my head. Yeah. So it was Allen, Ranta, and Dubnyk. I think they made the deal for Allen because they thought it was their best deal to make. And I could see it, though. I could see, depending on A, is Minnesota willing to retain, or what's the deal? Does a team have a cap room for him? I could see a team having interest in Dubnyk to be a number 2. Because you're going to need
$2.5 million.
Yeah. And that matters. His cap hits 4 something, but his cash is 2.5. That matters. So yes, I could see it.
Interesting. Last couple for For Elliotte, Tampa Bay is one team that I just can't figure out how they're going to be able to re-sign Cirelli, Sergachev, Chernak with their limited cap space. Tyler Johnson, somebody that I bet they'd move, but he's got a full no trade. What the heck did they do in Tampa Bay?
Well, I think one of the other things there is that I think some of those players have let it be known they're not that interested in waiving their no trades.
Right.
Which makes the problem even, more difficult. So that's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be and there are teams out there, Mike, there's a lot of talk out there right now. I think there's teams out there right now saying, I want to see what Tampa Bay does. Like, what's their decision making going to be? And so I think that's going to be interesting. But I think the biggest problem that Tampa's going to have there is negotiating those no trades. Because I heard there's guys who aren't crazy about waiving them. Mm-hmm. Now, Killorn is the one who has a partial one, right?
Yep.
That makes him a little bit more vulnerable, unfortunately. But is Tampa going to have to do sweeteners to get this done? That's going to be another question.
Yep, no doubt. Last two for you. On your last podcast, Jerry said that you're a Minnesota Vikings fan. What do you think of this season? That is off to just a ghastly start.
Well, I think as a Vikings fan, Michael, you learn to expect these kinds of things.
Yep.
I'll tell you, my sister's first husband was a Giants fan. And I'll never forget going over to his house to watch that 41-0 NFC championship game about 15, 20 years ago. It's just brutal. I mean, you're used to all of this stuff. So it doesn't bother me. I do it now more for the interest as much as anything else. I just kind of laugh it off because there's enough stressful things in people's life that I can't go crazy because of what the Vikings are doing. They've tortured me enough over the years. I'm not going to let them do it.
Yeah. And last question from Mitch. Tell us your best Jeff Merrick story. Jeff is one of my favorite people to listen to. So well-spoken. Is he that intelligent, that prepared, or both?
He is that intelligent, and he is that prepared. He's a very, very bright guy, and he loves hockey. Like, he's the guy who goes on Hockey DB and sits there for 3.5 hours clicking on names and see who connects to who. And initially they told me, I'll give you the Jeff Merrick story as credit to him. I heard several, when I first starting the podcast, they wanted me to do it by myself. And I said, please give me a co-host. I don't want to do this by myself. I don't want to listen to myself just talking for an hour. And they said, how about Merrick? And I said, absolutely. And he makes the podcast. Because a lot of the time we do the podcast the morning after we finish the blog. And my brains are completely scrambled. And he's always prepared. I think he's got ridiculously stupid ideas about the sport, like pink ice and stuff like that. But his hockey nerddom is unmatched.
Yeah,
and I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah, he's awesome. My buddy Reed, it's his favorite listen to Jeff Merrick. And it's funny how in this sport, when we actually get to travel and cover big events, Elliotte, how you remember sitting at a bar with somebody. Like, I remember at the draft in South Florida, sitting at this bar on Fort Lauderdale Beach with him for like an hour and a half talking hockey with him. And I remember that once with you in Pittsburgh as well during the Stanley Cup final. Elliotte, you're a saint for giving me so much time here on a day where I'm sure there's busy news about to happen. To listen to Elliotte Friedman, you can listen to the 31 Thoughts podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. You can read him on Sportsnet, the 31 Thoughts articles that he does. You can follow him on Twitter at Fridge HNIC for Hockey Night in Canada. That's FRIEDGE HNIC. Elliotte, thanks a lot, man. Thanks to Elliotte for joining this episode of the Talk North Hockey Show. Anthony LaPanta will join next week. Thanks to our sponsors, AquariusHomeservices.com, your local authorized dealer of Connecticut water treatments, Profile by Sanford, Twill and the Edina Galleria, State Farm agent Tony Hoagland, and Bosch Law Firm. And don't go anywhere. When I come back, we'll be answering a bunch of Twitter questions on the Minnesota Wild.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach and it was covered in ice. And I used to call it home. So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world